Well, hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe. Thanks for tuning in to Rosenfield 10, where I cover our beloved Bless You Boys in black and gold, the New Orleans Saints. Are you a Who Dat fan? If you're a Who Dat fan, subscribe to this channel. I love the Saints as much as you do. When you see one of my videos, you get to hear what I'm thinking. And we're keeping it in the Who Dat family. You let me know what you're thinking in the comments. I'll respond to my comments and we'll talk about it. You can have a good friend, a good neighbor, but man, if they're a Saints fan, as big of a Saints fan as you are, yeah, then that's a good relationship. You've always got something to talk about. Always go back for more. You want to know what they're thinking? I'm letting you know what I think. And right now, we're going to talk about what should be on every Saints fan's mind. That is the upcoming free agency, and it begins in a week. And what should the Saints actually target in free agency? We'll see what kind of money we've got to play with, and we'll see what they do. But let's talk about it here. So a lot of directions the Saints could go in. I love talking about the draft. That's a lot of what I do in the off season. Now, the scouting combine just finished, and if you're subscribed to my channel and you wanted a scouting combine breakdown, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't break down all the numbers that come out of the combine. I will be doing a video at the end of this week talking about some of my favorite players, and it's a reflection after the combine, but I don't typically let the combine numbers fool me too much. 90% of your evaluation on these players should have already happened based on their tape. You already know that certain guys are fast. When you see a guy that didn't do a lot in college have a great combine, you realize the athleticism at that point. It might make you go back and look at the tape a little closer, but basically all you're doing is thinking you can take this athlete and turn him into some sort of football player, a coach's dream, but if they didn't produce in college, they're probably not going to produce in the league. So, these numbers are nice and it's great. And I love the combine. I watched every day of the so-called underwear Olympics and I enjoyed it. I'm just I'm not all about breaking the combine down. There's plenty of videos out there that do it, the winners and the losers and stuff like that. I'm going to remain consistent. And my next video will just be about some players that I like that a lot of people don't talk about. And they're probably more like lower round players. And yeah, so we're still going to talk about college. But right now, it's the free agency market. The Saints typically address free agency pretty hard with a lot of low level, low money players, but they get a lot of them. They like to cover their bases. Whatever pieces are missing on the roster, they like to go in and get a piece and put it there. And then you can go into the draft with more of a best player available mentality, and you're not pigeonholed into certain positions that you feel like you have to take. But you also have to consider the depth of the draft. And this class has a lot of depth at certain positions. And so, whether you target these positions in this draft or not, chances are there's going to be really good players at these positions and you'll end up drafting some. So I look at it that way. It's not so much don't address a position in free agency because you know you can get one in the draft. It's not so much that. It's just that when you're in the draft, there's so many of those players that are so good, you're going to end up taking one anyway. It's not like you're going to be forced to. One of the better players at certain positions in the draft will probably be there. I've run enough simulations to know that there's a lot of good depth at certain positions in the draft, and players just kind of fall to you. And it's a train of thought. I don't know how the Saints are going to do it, how this organization is actually going to approach it, other than to think that they'll try to cover all of their bases in free agency and leave an open slate for the draft. The positions in the draft that I think are really deep this year are wide receiver and edge rusher at the top of the list. and you can get a good wide receiver, a good edge rusher all throughout the draft. There's a chance you can get decent defensive line players at certain spots in this draft, and you will certainly have your choice of a really good linebackers and really good safeties in this draft. And I've been saying that for months. So I'm not saying you don't address those positions in free agency. I'm just saying that when the draft comes up, chances are, because it's so deep with wide receivers, edge rushers, linebackers, safeties, and some defensive linemen, that you're going to end up grabbing a few of those. So I keep that in mind when I'm approaching the free agency market. I don't want to specifically pigeonhole myself and target those positions in the draft. I just I just know I feel really confident we're going to get a wide receiver, an edge rusher, a linebacker, and a safety in this draft. We could at any point and get a pretty good one. So, what do we go for in free agency? Well, I'm going to pull up the offense and the defense of the Saints currently as it stands, and then we'll talk about each position on the offense and then each position on the defense and how we should approach it in free agency. So here is the offense for our beloved Saints. And let's start with quarterback. Do we get a quarterback in free agency? Some people are talking about getting a veteran so that Shuck can have a mentor of sorts. You know, it's one of those things. I think that it's a plus, and we see Drew Brees talking about his backups glowingly all the time. So it's a plus. We already know that our staff is full of ex quarterbacks and they can develop quarterbacks. And we've got Shuck and Rattler on this team who are young and developing, it seems like progressing in a really good pace. And they're at a good spot. And I think as far as developing quarterbacks, I think we're good. So bringing a veteran in here, yeah, it would be nice. But I kind of like the idea of if we have to go without Shuck for a couple of games, Rattler being our guy. I'm kind of cool with that too. But you definitely need somebody on the practice squad. This roster includes everybody that's on our practice squad because it all starts off with a 90-man roster, and practice squads are determined after that. So everybody the Saints have under contract is on this list on offense. That means you have two quarterbacks and nobody to put on the practice squad. So you know you're going to go get a quarterback. Probably, in my opinion, probably Hunter Deckers after the spring league is over, right before, OTAs or training camp. We'll bring Deckers in the mix, and we'll probably bring somebody else in too. And it wouldn't surprise me to bring in a cheap veteran just so we can have another body in the room. We did that all year long. I mean, we had Hayner before and Deckers, but we also had a couple of veteran backups. We could go get a guy like that again. So Danucci or whatever, and so yeah, probably getting a quarterback in free agency, but we're talking about just a guy to have a body to have an extra arm for the practice squad and for scout team and stuff like that. Not a big name at all. No. I was suggesting Sam Howell, and depending on how cheap you can get him, he was with Kellen Moore before, and that would be a veteran presence in the room. It would also be a guy that I wouldn't mind having to start a game or two with. I think he's good enough to be able to manage that. So we'll see what we do with quarterback. At running back, I think it is a must. I think running back is something you have to address in free agency, and I would address it with a guy that you expect to take a lot of snaps for this team. You don't want to go into the draft expecting to get a running back that's going to be your starter. And right now, your starters here are Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller, and neither one of those guys are part of the future. So when I look at this room, I'm thinking we have Devin Neal and Audric Estime. That's our two guys. Yeah, we've got Kamara this year. We may even have Kendre Miller stay healthy this year and have him too. But I say you go and get a veteran. You go and get a guy. I'm suggesting Travis Etienne. You go and get him, bring him back to Louisiana. He's going to be our lead back for the next 3 to 4 years. After 4 years, he's probably going to, be in that Kamara age and might not be any good to us after that. But I would sign ATN to a 3 or 4 year contract, bring him in here because we're phasing out Kamara, and I don't think Kendre's part of the plans. You go and get a guy like that. If not ATN, you want to go and get somebody cheaper, Tyler Algier, I wouldn't mind, or going and get Sean Tucker, anything like that. I'm fine. Go get a veteran. I need somebody else here. I need to see someone else on the top of this list at halfback besides Kendre Miller and Alvin Kamara. They're not part of the future here. Yeah, if you're able to draft one and they turn out better than Devin Neal and Audric Estime, great, great. But I'm not basing this Kellen Moore offense on that. I'm going to go and get a guy. Kellen Moore needs to identify a guy in free agency that he can build this running game around and go and get him. Whether that's Etienne or whether it's Dowdle or whether that's whoever. Just go and get him, bring him in here. Kellen Moore has to get this running game going. And if you're able to go and grab Etienne and then Jeremiah Love sitting there at pick 8, grab him too. And you can phase Kamara and Miller out real quick. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would definitely go and get a free agent running back. We need a guy that's going to be here in 3 years. That's going to be a guy we can depend on to start. I love Devin Neal. I love Audric Estime. But go and get another guy because Kamara and Miller aren't going to be here. Probably by next year, they'll both be gone. So go and get a guy in free agency now. Get him under contract for 3 or 4 years. Have our bases covered, and then let the draft fall as it may. At wide receiver in free agency, I don't think it's a good idea to address it. We've got Vele, we've got Polk, we've got Palmer to go along with Olave. That's a 4-man room. Usually you carry 5 or 6. You've also got the option of re-signing Dante Pettis. And you've also got everyone that played on this team at the end of the year last year. Kevin Austin, Mason Tipton, Ronnie Bell, Samori Torre. You never know. Bub Means stays healthy. Maybe he could be your number 5. But yeah, I look at this room and we've already got 4 in the room with Olave, Vele, Polk, and Palmer. We're still hoping. We haven't seen what Polk and Palmer can do yet. We know what Olave can do. We've we've had a decent sample size of Vele. It looks very promising. And Polk is a decent player. I don't think we're going to have issues there. I think Polk at worst is your number 5. He's your number 3 right now. Palmer, your number 4. You go get Dante Pettis again, or whoever Kellen Moore really likes out of Austin or Tipton or Bell or Torrey or Means or whatever. But I don't think you hit it too hard in free agency. If you want to go get a veteran, somebody like a Cedric Wilson, like we've done in the past, we've gone and get a you know Marquez Valdez Scantling, something like that. You go and get a veteran who's cheap, put him in here and see if he can stick on the roster and kind of be that mentor to the young room. You go and get guys like that. But like I said, the draft is full of wide receivers. Most of my mocks, I end up drafting 2 of them because it's so deep. And guys are just sitting there that are so good that I want to get in the mix. So I don't spend big money at wide receiver in free agency for this team this year. I go and get a veteran, something cheap. I re-sign Pettis or something like that. And then I go get a couple of pieces in the draft because the draft is deep at wide receiver. And yeah, if you go and get a guy in the first round or the second round, he's probably part of the starting rotation. If you get a guy on day 3, he's probably going to be so physically gifted that he's going to make this roster. And maybe you can be more excited about a 4th round guy or a 5th round guy this year's draft than you would be a Trey Palmer. That's what I'm thinking. Certainly a number five on this team. If you get a guy in day three on in this draft is full of really good wide receivers. So yeah, I am a sucker for leaning on the draft for wide receiver, but I'll cover my bases. I'll go get Dante Pettis and a veteran, a cheap veteran. I'll do that in free agency, but yeah, I'm not going to get Dobbs or spending big money on Jennings or anything like that unless Kellen Moore has a vision for one of those guys to be a starter. You do that and you relieve yourself of a need for wide receiver going into the draft. That's great in principle, but like I said, it's the class is so deep that one of your picks is going to come up and the best guy on the board is going to be a wide receiver. I just feel that way. It could be a viable option in just about any round. All right, what about tight end? Tight end is something I think we definitely address in free agency. Definitely. The room just isn't good enough after Juwan Johnson. You don't have a starting caliber player. You have a receiving tight end in Welch. You have a kind of a complete tight end in Mataval, and you've got a run blocking tight end in Mitchell Payton. So you've got different types, but none of them you want to be your priority to go to guy. I mean, well, Welch is a good wide receiver. I like what I saw with from him in spot duty, but yeah, I think you go and get a big name in free agency to bring in here along with Johnson. I look at everybody on this team after Johnson and no, you can improve. Even if you just go get some regular old middle of the road or cheap veteran that's a free agent this year, they're going to come in here and compete. So I think you re-sign Foster Moreau. That's one guy I'm thinking of from that ilk. You go and re-sign Foster Moreau. He's great in the locker room. He's a great local guy to have around. We've invested in him for a few years now. He didn't get a chance really to develop much under this system, so I think you re-sign Morrow for real cheap. He's a great addition to this room, and he's better than everybody else on this list right now after Johnson. That's not where I stop though. In free agency, I want to go get a big player, somebody like Isaiah Likely or Dallas Goddard. Goddard would probably be a guy that makes a lot of sense. He's older and he'd probably be expensive, but if we're going to spend money in free agency, that's an area I wouldn't mind spending. Go and get Dallas Goddard so you can have yourself a bona fide starting tight end who can inline run block when you need him to. And you just keep deploying Jawan Johnson as you have been. And let's run some more two tight end sets with effect because uh, Dallas Goddard's way better than Foster Moreau. Yeah, you cover your bases with Morrow and then go try to get Goddard. If not Goddard, Likely. I love Isaiah. Yeah, Isaiah Likely. And who else do I like at tight end? We've got a couple of people that I'm interested in. You can also go after Njoku. I've always liked Njoku. And you can do whatever. If it's Noah Fant or if it's, Dolchich or Higby or whatever. I mean, this this room you can just put a average guy in here and improve this room. That's why I say you go ahead and get Morrow. You know what you got with him as far as a leader, for sure. You cover that base, and then you go get either Likely or Dallas Goddard. And then when you get into the draft, if a player falls to you or if a player's there, somebody like a Dolan Bentley or a Sam Roush on day three would just be a great pick, a super steal. And yeah, whether he's ready to develop now and play now or not, you've got your bases covered. I'm hitting tight end hard in free agency. All right, and the last thing we're going to talk about is this offensive line for the offense. And I think you go hard in free agency here. Not for starters at tackle, not for a starter at center, but a backup at tackle and a backup at center. But at guard, you go super, super hard. You go for a starting left guard. You put all the money in the world out there. You make sure you sign a starting really good left guard. There's a bunch you can choose from in free agency. It's not the deepest free agent class of guard, but there's players out there that will improve this offensive line drastically. Drastically. If you just go and pay them and get them. And not only get a left guard, I say you go and get a starting caliber right guard too. And I think you go and get a backup guard. Yeah, so I was suggesting you re-sign Dylan Redunds to be your backup. You go and get a guy like David Edwards to be your starting left guard. You give him 25 million, whatever it takes, to make him your starting left guard, and then you still go get another starter. I was talking about Ed Ingram or Elijah Vera-Tucker or shoot, anybody that's in free agency right now. David Parham, the guy from the Steelers. I mean, are we going to go get two guards and pay both of them 20 million? No. No, I think you go and throw a lot of money at a starting left guard and then you go and compete for a starting right guard because Cesar Ruiz ain't it. So if you got to spend 8 to 14 million to guarantee Ed Ingram or David Parham, you go ahead and do that too. And you go and get Dylan Reduns. And you have to get a backup center and you have to get a backup tackle. Last year, we were leaning on Landon Young to be our backup tackle, and he got hurt. And then our backup center was going to be Will Clapp, and he got hurt the first damn play of preseason. And now Will Clapp has since retired. So this team went out and got a backup tackle in Landon Young and a backup center in Will Clapp. Then we had to trade for Luke Fortner, and now Fortner's a free agent. So we made a lot of moves on the offensive line, but I think it's priority. One of the top priorities here, priority number one is starting left guard. And I think shortly after that, starting right guard and a backup guard, but also a backup tackle and a backup center. Now, whether you re-sign Landon Young and Luke Fortner or whether you go somewhere else, but a move like that has to happen. You have to have your bases covered. If Fortner wants to price himself out of here, and get paid, let's say, $8 million by the Browns to go be their starter, then buy Fortner. I'll go find somebody else. But we need to go get a backup center, a center slash guard type like Will Clapp would be perfect, and a backup offensive tackle. So, yeah, that's five positions in free agency right there. Starting left guard, starting right guard, at least a guard that's going to compete with Cesar Ruiz. And then Dylan Redunds. Maybe Dylan Redunds is that guy. Maybe you can only swing two. Maybe you just go get a starting left guard and then you re-sign Dylan Reduns and you hope you can make Cesar Ruiz work. And then definitely a backup center and a backup tackle. Now that's the way I am. So as far as offense goes, I'm going in hard on running back and tight end and guard. That's where I'm going in hard. Running back, tight end, guard. And like I said, offensive line after that. And yeah, whatever you want to do at wide receiver and quarterback. All right, that is the offense. And let's take a look at the defense now. We're going to pull that up. This is our defense as it stands right now. Everyone under contract. What should we hit in free agency next week on defense? Well, I've talked about the edge rushers in this year's draft class. It's a deep position. You can also get some pieces for the defensive line at various places in the draft. So the front three, I think you can go into free agency and get some pieces, but I would probably just re-sign pieces we already had. I was suggesting re-signing John Ridgeway because he can play defensive tackle or defensive end, and then you re-sign Jonathan Bullard or maybe Jonah Williams and give yourself another piece here. You hoping Vernon Broughton turns into something, and Nathan Shepard had his best year with the Saints last year. Brian Bresee, not so much. This is a year where he's going to have to show something or he's gone. That's the way I look at it. And I'm not concerned with moving away from a first rounder. if he can't produce any better than he did last year. He was okay last year, but yeah, I would rather start Jonathan Bullard so I can be good against the run and then put Brzee in there on passing downs, and then Brzee has to perform better than he did from the end position this past year as a pass rusher. Brzee's superpower is pass rush, and it was non-existent last year. He had some pressures and stuff, but he's got to take a big leap in this system for me to be stoked about this. But I don't think you can go in free agency and grab a defensive end that's going to be our starter. Yeah, I don't want to trade 2 first-round picks for Max Crosby. Okay, so and there may be some young guys out there on the defensive line or at edge rusher that some teams are willing to spend a lot of money on that have this kind of potential. If we have enough money in free agency that we can go and try to do something like that, okay, it's going to have to be a special player. And I'm not sure. A lot of people are talking about edge rushers. So yeah, defensive line free agency, go get Bullard again or Williams, and then go get Ridgeway, and then let the draft fall as it may. At least you've got your starters from before, from last year, and then hopefully you can find some pieces later in the draft. But I would address defensive line and free agency that way. Just fill in the gaps. Go into this year with the same group you had last year, and then hopefully you can improve in the draft. And then at edge rusher, outside linebacker here, at edge rusher, yeah, I would resign Cam Jordan and Chris Rumph, and I would just make the room the same it was last year. We had a good room last year. Go resign Cam Jordan for $7 million to $10 million, and resign Chris Rumph. He's not going to be expensive, and he was great in this defense. And then you've got edge rusher covered. Then you go into the draft where it's really deep at edge rusher, and you find some more pieces, and those pieces can eventually take Jordan's place. We're going to sign him, re-sign him, but we're only re-signing him the 1 year. I think that's the best way to go. If there's a younger guy than Jordan that you can go out there and get for $7 to $10 million, and you think you can get the same production, you're hoping you get the same production from Jordan that you got from Jordan last year. But yeah, if you think there's a younger guy you can go and spend the same amount of money on and go get him instead of Jordan, you got to consider Jordan being a lifelong Saint and his leadership in the room compared to a younger guy with a lot more, future potential. But that's how I look at edge rusher in free agency. Yeah, go get Jordan and Rumph again, and then take advantage of this draft and bring in some more pieces after that. I think you're really good if you bring back Rumph and Jordan. You're hoping from a jump from Diggs, but you still got Chase Young and Carl Granderson as your starters. Cam Jordan is your number three. Chris Rumph is your number four. Diggs is a practice squad guy. And then you hit the draft. I think that's the way to go. Linebacker, inside linebacker. Yeah, I don't want to go and spend a lot of money on a starter if it's not going to be Demario Davis. You go and get Demario Davis. If it costs you 10 million, 12 million, whatever, go and get him. That's the move I want to make. I like his leadership. I would sign him the 2 years. And then if you want to get another guy in the pipeline after that, fine, because we're good with Davis and Werner and Stutzman and Isaiah Stallberg and Jalen Ford. I think we're really good at linebacker if you re-sign Davis. If you can't re-sign Davis, maybe go and get a guy that's been in the Staley defense before, a veteran that's not going to be too expensive. I don't see us going get Caden Ellis or Bobby Wagner if we can't get Demario Davis. You just go get a guy that can play middle linebacker for you that's been in the Staley defense before, and hope that Werner and Stutzman can make it a starter if you can't get Davis back. Because the draft is full of good linebackers, and you're going to fall into one. You could. You could address it high. Everyone loves Sonny Styles now all of a sudden. He's a really good player, guys. He's really good. That would be a great player to get if you're not re-signing Davis. But yeah, don't go spend big in free agency on a middle linebacker. If you can't get Davis, Just get a guy that can plug in, hope for the best with Werner and Stutzman and Stallberg, and then take advantage of this deep class in the draft. And to round the video out on defense, we're talking about DBs. I'll knock safety out real quick. You're really good at safety with Jonas Sanker, Justin Reed, Julian Blackman, Jordan Howden. Really good. I even like Elliot Davison, local guy who had a few plays in preseason last year as an undrafted rookie. So I like the room at safety. If I do re-sign a safety in free agency, Terrell Burgess, Ugo Amadi, re-sign one of those guys. You got extra depth at safety and a really good special teams player if you do that, but you also have a nickelback. So Terrell Burgess and Ugo Amadi are my targets at safety in free agency because of the backup nickel potential. Because I don't plan on re-signing Taylor. And then at cornerback, you're going to be wanting a nickelback for sure. And I think you can go get one in free agency. Whether you want to spend top dollar and get D. Alford or anybody else, I've suggested uh, somebody from Brandon Staley's system, like Asante Samuel Jr. If you can get him and he can play nickel and on the outside, that would be great. Re-signing Burgess would be great because he can play nickel. You just cover your bases. You need to cover them. And I think outside corner, if you're not re-signing Alontae Taylor, outside corner becomes a priority too. I don't want Nickelback to be my number one priority going into the draft. I want to cover my bases there. I would like to sign a veteran free agent that can play nickel and start at nickel for us. We've got options on the team already. Not to mention, I want to re-sign Burgess or Amadi. So we're going to have enough bodies to cover nickel going into the draft. And if somebody falls where they fall, if Downs is there in round one, or if Keontae Scott's there in round two, or Jalen Kilgore in round three, you go and grab that guy too, and hopefully he can be your future. But yeah, definitely cover your bases. I suggest going hard for D. Alford to play nickel if Staley thinks he can fit and man that star role. And I still think you go and get an outside guy. So if Asante Samuel can play outside and nickel, you go and grab him. Yeah. And I suggest getting two cornerbacks, a good outside guy that can compete with Isaac Yadam, and perhaps Quincy Riley. But I don't want to spend big money. Instead of spending 17 million on Taylor, I want to spend 17 million on two cornerbacks. We did that when we let Marcus Williams go. We didn't want to spend all that money on Marcus Williams, so we went and got two guys. We got that one guy, I think, from the Chiefs, maybe, and he didn't work out too well. But we also got Tyrann Mathieu. So we got Mathieu and that other guy for the same price as Williams. And it worked out because Mathieu worked out. So that's what I suggest. You let Taylor go and go get two guys in his place. An outside veteran starter who can compete with Riley or Isaac Yadam, who's our number three, and then go get a nickel. And then you re-sign Burgess or Amadi, and you've got your bases covered. So you go into the draft, you don't have to necessarily force it. And in the last two positions, I'll mention punter and kicker. Yeah, I'm not wanting to spend $6-7 million on a kicker or a punter. Okay, so get that out of your mind. All right, you might have to spend 4 or 5 million to get a really good punter. You could just go get a really good middle of the road to above average punter and just say, hey, we're done there. I'm hoping and praying Charlie Smith turns into a great kicker. But those are positions to focus on as well. If we go and sign a big ticket kicker or punter, it won't upset me, except that, I really just want Charlie Smith to work. Don't know if it will, but it would be a great story. So there you go. That's my video. What do we address in free agency? You go hard on offense for running back, tight end, and offensive line, especially starting guards, but all across for backups at offensive line. That's what you do on offense. And on defense, I think you re-sign some players on the defensive line and an edge rusher, and then you go into the draft hoping to improve there. At linebacker, get Demario Davis back. If not, just get a veteran who can be a safety valve behind what you already have in the room, and take advantage of the draft at linebacker as well. And then in free agency, you got to go get a nickel back, and I think an outside back. If you don't re-sign Taylor, just go get two veterans. Spend 17 million on two players instead of one. Get an outside corner and a nickel, and re-sign a couple of our safeties so you can have depth at nickel as well. And that's how I look at free agency. I have a video talking about the perfect offseason, and I go into more detail about, what I would do in free agency there, but I don't address everything there. I mean, so that's what this video is for. That's what I think we should be doing going into free agency. We'll see what we do next week, and I'll refer to this video once we get most of those free agent signings done, and we'll see how close I was to what I think they should do and what the Saints actually do. You guys let me know what you want them to do in the comments below. I'm Joe. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10. Subscribe right now. Put me in your subscriptions, and I'll always be there. Anytime I've got something to say and you talk to me about it, we can have a conversation. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Who dat?